Welcome to Cash Plays. And now your host, Bart Hanson.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Cash Plays. Thank you for joining me. Cash Plays, of course, the only show that dedicates all its time to talking cash game poker, none of that tournament documents. I am Bart Hanson. I am your host. And, of course, you can email us at cashplays@pokerroad.com. Or if you want to leave a voicemail, 877-836-ROAD. It is March 18th, and we are on iTunes. It's absolutely amazing to me how many emails have come in at that cashplays@pokerroad.com asking, when are you going to be on iTunes? You know, I can listen to the show through the website, but I want to listen to it through the iPod. Well, we're there. If you do a search in the iTunes store for Poker Road or Cash Plays, we are there. And it looks like it's increased in popularity. I'm not exactly sure how iTunes does its popularity meter, but we're up there. So I want to thank the tech guys at Poker Road for getting that together. I know we've had some technical difficulties this week in terms of trying to listen to the RSS feed through the website. And I just really don't have an answer for you guys. I know there's been a lot of emails that come in. I have probably pestered Joe Seabach multiple times this week trying to figure out what's going on, and they are swamped over there. And I'm sure that they're going to make their best effort to smooth everything together. But now that we're on iTunes, you can just go and subscribe to the podcast, and you will get every Cash Plays episode every single Tuesday. So, we've hit the big time. There's a couple things I want to address this week before we get into the email segment of the show. And number one is respect for online poker. And what I mean by that is I came up playing poker as a live player. A lot of you know me from Live at the Bike. I used to be a limit prop. I never really took online poker seriously. Back in the day, I know I've actually had a couple of people come out to me. I used to play 2-4 no limit 6 max on Absolute. And I was looking back at my poker tracker statistics. I was like cleaning out an old computer, and I did quite well. But it was always kind of like a fun thing. I never really took it super, super seriously. And I never played online poker for a living. I never really did it for real money. When I came off of the World Series in 2007, I made quite a bit of money. And I thought to myself, well, Live at the Bike was done a couple months before. I had no commitment to going to live casino. So I thought I could just, I'm going to go and play online. Obviously, this is a year and a half after Card Runners had come out. And I hopped immediately into 2-4-6 max on Full Tilt because I had a rakeback deal. And I pretty much got crushed. And I never took it really seriously. I never worked on my game. When I say I got crushed, not necessarily that I got crushed, but I would get discouraged. I might play 1,000 hands and win, and then play 2,000 hands and lose, and then not play again. I never really took it serious enough where I wanted to do a really big hand sample. And I'd go out and party, and I'd come back, from a bar, and I'd blow some money playing heads up in a game that I had no business playing heads up, 4 a.m. Pacific time, and I'd be playing 5-10 no limit heads up on Stars or on Full Tilt against guys that really worked on their game and, were very trained to play heads up. So, I've gone through a couple of different phases online where I abandoned it, and then when I was actually on Poker Road, I was playing short-handed stud high-low 30-60 on Stars, and the swings were just ridiculous. Like, I remember going out $12,000 one week, and then going down $8,000 the next week, and then going back up $5,000 the next week, and then down $8,000 the next week, and then I stopped again. But I never really took the time to work on my online game. I've watched a few videos from Card Runners, looked at Stocks Poker, looked at Deuces Cracked, I've looked at all the sites, and I now appreciate that online is a different game from live poker. Online it's a more aggressive game. Obviously it's more math based. It's more about, I think, putting your opponent to the test. The hand ranges live are so much more polarized than they are online, and I talked about this in the first episode, where online you're always putting pressure on your opponent, whereas live, I know what my opponent has. I can specifically put them on a few hands, not a range of hands, but a few hands. So it's a much different game. But the reason why I'm talking about this is because I have now found respect from online, and I've found a game that I can beat the hell out of online. And it's over a relatively small sample size. I've played about 15 to 17,000 hands now of pot limit Omaha 8 or better on Full Tilt and on PokerStars. And I got to tell you, even at the 1-2 level, I started playing at 50 cent $1 because I had made these mistakes before last August, hopping into too big of a game, not being accustomed to playing online, and thinking, well, I'm going to jump into what relatively is a small game at 2-4, but when you're playing 8 tables, it's really not. And 2-4 is it's a mid to high stakes level at no limit, especially at 6 max. I had played PLO 8 or better over Christmas a little bit, and I had had some success. But then like I said, I started, hopping into 30-60 stud high-low, winning, losing, and then I gave up, or I just took my money out because I was like, I can't deal with these swings mentally. But I never really gave PLO 8 or better a real shot. Now, over the last 2 weeks, I've been playing 4 to 5 hours, 8 tabling, full ring 1-2 pot limit Omaha 8 or better. So I get to put in about 400 hands to 500 hands an hour. And the typical opponent makes fundamental mistakes. And it's not like I was a PLO 8 or better expert, but playing over Christmas for about 5 to 10,000 hands, I started to realize I actually was playing 3-6 at that time. And I was getting myself into situations. It was almost like I started off high and learned high the first 5,000 hands, where now that I'm multi-tabling at 1-2, I can really beat the hell out of it. PLO 8 or better is just a game where there's just not that much information out there about how to play it. I think there's one video on Deuces Cracked, which I actually watched, which is pretty good, but it's nothing that's like, too advanced. And I just see, common errors, and I'm very encouraged by the level of play. And the other thing that was different than about 3 or 4 months ago is that there are actually games out there. There are actually 6 1-2 PLO 8 or better games going on Full Tilt, and then other 3 or 4 on Stars that are 2-4. Another one at 3-6, and another one at 3-6 or 5-10 on Full Tilt. And there's also a whole bevy of just an insane amount of no limit 8 or better, no limit Omaha 8 or better games at the lower levels. Now, I haven't really stepped into the no limit games, so I think that's more of a gambling pre-flop game. But the PLO 8 or better games have been really good to me. I've been beating it at a consistent clip, and I've never had a stage in my poker career where I ever wanted to play more online than I am now. I'm actually going to Foxwoods next week for about 2 weeks. I'm going to play a lot live, but I'm going to incorporate probably 2 to 4 hours, 5 days a week of online play at those levels, which would constitute 3 hours on average a day, 5 days a week, 15 hours a week. Probably, anywhere from 5 to 7,000 hands per week. And the interesting thing is that if you're playing a no limit or a pot limit 1-2 game, everyone talks about a poker tracker big bet statistic, which basically means it's double the big blind. That statistic came around during the limit. It would be how many big bets per 100 hands can you make? Well, in no limit and pot limit, there is no big bet. it's just double the big blind. Like if you're playing 20-40 limit, the big blind is 20, so the big bet is 40. So if you're playing 1-2 no limit, the big bet is $4. So if I'm playing 1-2 pot limit, and I can make 7 to 8 big bets per 100, that's about 30 cents per hand. And if I'm playing 400 to 500 hands per hour, you can see the hourly, $100 to $150 an hour. Now these games go normally, I will play around 4 p.m. Pacific time to 7 p.m. Pacific time. So on the East Coast, probably a little bit later. So if you want to say hi to me in the chat box, you can check them out. I'll be playing again, 7 to 10 Eastern time. And my goal is to play 10,000 hands per week now over the next few weeks. And I'm very encouraged by the play. And again, it's a game that a lot of people don't know how to play. There isn't much instruction. I have an edge because I've been playing 8 or better for a long, long time. And one of my weaknesses in limit Omaha 8 or better is I was more of a nut peddler. And I think sometimes I don't go for a second each way when sometimes the odds suggest that you should. But in big bet Omaha 8 or better, it actually helps me to be more disciplined. So I'm very, very encouraged for that. And again, because I'm sitting here and I can actually do it, I can actually play 4 to 5 hours a day. I'm not getting burnt out. I have so much more respect for the online game. I don't tilt off. I'm not going to come back from a night of drinking and play, and hop into some heads-up game I have no business playing in, because this is actually my, it's my job. I think it's tougher than live. I think it takes more concentration, but it's also more convenient. And again, this is the first time I've ever had this stage of my poker career where I felt comfortable playing and making good money online in a cash game. So we'll see. I'll keep you updated to where that takes me. The other topic I want to talk about, thin value betting on the river. And we've had a couple of emails come in over the last few weeks about this. Fundamentally, in a limit game, if there's more than a 50% chance that you beat your opponent when called, a bet on the river is prudent. Well, I think that concept can also be applied to no limit. And I'll give you an example. Say the pot is $300 and you bet whatever amount. Let's say you bet $150 in no limit. If the opponent calls you, if your opponent calls you for $150, and when he calls, you beat them more than 50% of the time, then the bet is prudent. Now, it's a little bit trickier in no limit because of the possibility of a check raise on the river. It's different in limit because it only costs you one bet. But if you're playing deeper stacked in no limit, it can cost you a whole bunch. But I do surmise that most of the people that listen to this show are playing in restricted bind games. They're not playing in gigantic, uncapped, no-limit games. And the stack sizes warrant a value bet on the river where you don't have to worry about a river check raise. The other thing, forget about the stack sizes, is that, I've been playing 5, 10, and 10, 20 no-limit for the last 3 years live. And I can count the number of times on my hand that I have been check raised on the river. And they have always had it. Now, for all of you guys that are accustomed to playing online and are used to check raise river bluffing, well, fine. But I have never seen anybody shown down at the mid stakes no limit levels live, and I'm talking about up to 10-20, a check raise river bluff. It's pretty rare, and I don't think that you should worry about it that much until you start playing into deeper stack games. Now, if you want to be really conservative about it, because if you say, I'm going to make a thin value bet on the river and I'm always going to fold to a check raise, well, then you can say, if I make this bet and I'm called 40, and I get called and I win, I win 45% of the time. then it's right. Or excuse me, 55% of the time, then it's right. You have to actually up it the other way. You have to offset the river check raise. 55 or 60% of the time, then if you're really concerned about the river check raise, then you can up that number. But again, I wouldn't really worry about a river check raise. It just happens so rarely. And I'm going to give you a couple examples about thin value bets on the river that I have made and I saw a buddy of mine made. And, you start to understand what I'm talking about here. This is the hand I played a couple weeks ago. This was at Commerce. This is in a 10-20 game. And I had 10-7 of hearts in position, and I had limped in, and there was, 5-way action, or 4 or 5-way action, or something like that. And the pot was $100. I had 10-7 of hearts, again, on the button, and the flop came out 10-9-8. And it got checked to me. I bet 80. I had top pair, obviously in the bottom end of an open-ended straight draw to the jack or the six. And a guy called in early position. So I bet 100, or excuse me, I bet 90. He calls. The pot now is approximately 280. The turn's a queen. So obviously it brings a one-liner to a straight. There were a couple spades on the flop. 10 of spades, 9 of hearts, 8 of spades. So there's a spade draw out there. I thought that he could have called with the jack, open-ended straight draw, or a spade draw. Turn was a queen of diamonds. So the spades don't come, but obviously the jack is there. If the guy called with the jack, he's got a straight. He checks to me. I check. There might be a case for betting against spades, but I check behind. Now the river comes to 7. And it's not a spade. So the board reads now 10, 9, 8, queen, 7. I've made 10s and 7s. The jack has not come. He checks to me. Again, yeah, he might have messed spades, and if I bet, he wouldn't call. But I didn't think that he would check a jack to me, obviously, because the straight's out there and spades didn't come through. So I thought that there was a really, there was a more than 50% chance that if he called my river bet that I won. And let's look at the board texture. 10, 9, 8. I think that this guy was not a good player. I don't think he was bad enough to call with a hand like 9-6, a gut shot to the bottom end of a straight draw. And I totally rule out a jack. Because if he had a jack, he would bet the river. And if he missed spades, he's not calling anyways. So it's an issue of what are the ranges of hands that he'll call with that I will win more than 50% of the time? Well, what if he had a 7 in his hand as well? Remember, we've dismissed a jack. What if he had a pair with a 7 in it? That makes sense. If he had a total, naked 7, which is really bad to call, he's probably not going to call. But what if he had 9-7? Or what if he had 8-7? The pot is $280. I thought there was a good enough chance where if I were to bet 150 here, that he would call me with a hand like 9-7 or 8-7. I bet 150. He called. I said, I have 2 pair. I think higher than yours. Well, he said, no. And he turned over queen 9. He had called with a gut shot to the jack with second pair, turned queens up on the turn, but then got scared, obviously because it was a one-liner to a straight, and didn't bet the turn, didn't bet the river. So I bet, and I lose. And I thought to myself, oh, what a stupid bet. But then when I thought, then when I started thinking about it, no, it wasn't a stupid bet at all. I think that guy definitely would have called with those, with a range of hands where when he called me, he would have lost more than 50% of the time. It just happened to be that he had queen 9. If he's going to call me and I win 90% of the time, there's still a 10% chance that I'm going to lose. So don't get discouraged when you make a thin value bet at the end and you lose. No Limit Hold'em is all about making thin value bets, again, especially against people that are incapable of making river check raises and against short stacks. And that's going to bring me to hand 2. Short stack river betting. And this was a hand that I saw my buddy play down a couple of months ago at the bike. Joe McLean, anybody who used to watch live at the bike, his name is Chester on 2+2. He's actually going to come in on the show after I come back from Foxwoods and talk about the psychology of poker and just about your mindset. But he played this hand really, really well. And a lot of you guys who play restricted buy-in games should take some advice about scary river cards and watching your opponent's stack sizes. So my buddy Joe was in position here with pocket kings. And the villain was in the blind. And the villain started with 900. This was a 5-10 no limit game at the bike. Joe raised to $60, which is a standard raise in position. And the villain called in the big blind. So the pot is 135 plus the blinds, 5-10, 60, 65, and 10. And Joe's got kings. The flop, and again, the villain started with 900. The flop came out queen of spades, 9 of spades, 3 of hearts. Obviously a very draw-heavy board. Spade draw, straight draw. It got checked to Joe. He bet 100. The villain called. Now the pot's 335. I'm sitting there, and, my first take was there was a possibility that he was on a draw. He check-called rather quickly, but I also thought he had a queen. So the pot is 335. Very draw-heavy board. The turn is the 4 of hearts. Backdoor heart draw comes in. Queen, 9, 3, 4, 2 spades, 2 hearts. Well, the villain in the blind checks to Joe again. Joe bets 275. Now remember, the villain now, after the $100 call that he made on the flop and pre-flop, he has 740 in his stack. Joe bet 275. The villain called again. Now the pot's 835. And the villain in the blind has 465 left. The river is the worst draw completing, card if you were to have 2 kings. It's the 8 of spades. Queen, 9, 3, 4, 8. Spades get there. Jack 10 gets there. But the villain checks now on the river. The pot is 835. Blind's got 465 left. What do you do? I see so many people in live poker that check this down. But if you figure the guy for a queen, if you were to bet him all in here, if you bet 465, the pot's going to be 1,300, 465 to call. You're almost giving the guy 3-1. Would he really check Jack 10 at the end? Would he really check spades at the end? Remember what you're representing pre-flop. Unless the guy is absolutely atrocious, if he's going for a Jack 10 draw, why would he not bet it on the river? Why would you care about the spade at the end? So when he checks the river and his stack is so small, it gives you a lot of information. So with 835 left, and he's got 465 in his stack, Joe makes a bet all in, which I thought was a great bet with his hand, 2 kings. Because, again, you think about it. Is this guy going to call me more than 50% of the time with a big queen? What if he's got ace queen? What if he thinks I'm bluffing and I'm trying to represent spades? A lot of idiots check it down at the end when they don't, when they see spades. So a guy with an ace queen or a king queen might think, well, this guy wouldn't bet an overpair. He would check it down. So I'm going to call with ace queen. So Joe moves him in for 465. The pot's 1,300, 465 to call, and he calls. And he has ace queen. Which brings up the point that I want to make. Whenever you are against a shorter stack, if you can find a way to somehow massage the pot and give your opponent on the river 2.5 to 3-1 odds to call with one pair, you have pretty much succeeded in what you want to do, no matter what the stack sizes are. Because over the years, I have found if you can give your opponent more than 2.5 to 1 to call, and he has got top pair, top kicker, there is a very good chance that he will call. And you don't have to worry about a river check raise. That's the beauty of restricted games, and that's the beauty of going against an opponent that has a shorter stack. So aim for 2.5, aim for 3-1. 3-1. However you can massage that pot, if you've got aces and you know that you beat your opponent, do whatever it takes to make a bet on the river that gives him 3-1 odds to call at the end. Whether that's making a big bet on the turn, making a small bet on the flop, whatever you can do to give him 3-1 odds on the river to call. 3-1 all in. Again, we're talking about a short stack. When you push all in, giving him 2.5, conservatively 3-1, making a bet where he is going to get 3 times pot odds to call. That is your proper play. Well, stick around because we're going to get to some more of your email questions and discuss more cash game strategy right here on Cash Plays.
Cash Plays.
Want to learn how to play poker like multiple prelim event winner Joe Seebach? Or perhaps you want to learn how to bubble the TV final table over and over and over again. The Bear taught Seebach, and let him teach you. PokerRoad.com is the only site where you can get exclusive audio tips from poker champion Barry Greenstein. Click on Tips from the Bear to download the podcast today.
Cash Plays.
And we're back with Cash Plays, the email segment. Of course, you can email us at cashplays@pokerroad.com. Again, cashplays@pokerroad.com. Any general questions you have about cash game poker, hand analysis, anything is fair game. Just get it into me and I read everything. First email here comes from David in the United Kingdom. He says, I was wondering if you could please talk about scare cards and action killers. This is something I think we could all learn from. Say I flop a set of 4s, the other guy has top pair. Should I raise because the ace might kill my action coming on the turn? When I flop a set now, I rarely slow play for this reason. I understand the texture of the board has a lot to do with it. Time and again, scare cards seem to fall, and I'm not getting value for my hand. Well, thank you very, very much for that email. And in last week's episode, I actually said in the beginning that I was going to discuss this, and then I didn't get to this email. But David, if anybody who has been a fan of Live at the Bike, I always advocate fast-playing hands because of scare cards that come. And a lot of you that play in restricted bind games where you're not playing that deep, or anybody that plays in 100 times big blind games online, have to realize that when you are calling to try to draw from, 10 times the raise size, like I talk about with small pocket pairs, when a guy raises to 40, and you call with pocket 4s, knowing that you have to make at least 400 in the hand, or when you're calling with a suited connector, trying to make 20 times the preflop raise size, you must fast play the hand for a number of reasons. Normally, the board will come out with a 2-suit or some sort of straight draw. Let's say that it doesn't come out with a 2-suit. Let's say it's a straight draw. Guy raises. You think he's got a big pair. You call with pocket 6s. 9-6 deuce. Well, let's say he's got queens. He bets. Now you say in your head, I'm going to slow play. There aren't a whole lot of action cards that, action killing cards that can come. There isn't a 2 flush out there, so I call. Well, now the turn's a 9. Or, now the turn's a 10. Or, now the turn's a 5. Or, now the turn's a king. Or, now the turn's an ace. So you didn't realize how many cards can actually scare your opponent with 2 queens, right? Top pair pairing, open-ended straight draw getting there, and overcards coming. Even something like bottom pair or middle pair pairing up in restricted bind games. People might not think through it. If you know that your opponent will stack off with an overpair on a flop, make the raise, get the money in. Say the board comes out king 7 deuce, offsuit. Well, there's no draw out there, and you flop a set of 7s. Well, why would I want to raise, you say? Well, think of your opponent with 2 aces or ace king. He bets, you raise. Well, now he thinks to himself, well, why would he raise? There's no draw out there. He must be trying to make a play. And I'm gonna call. And it happens time and time and again. So when you're thinking about slow playing your set, or if you've called with a suited connector and you flop flush or two pair or trips, always remember there are a number of cards that will slow your opponent down on the turn. He can make up some sort of excuse that some card will help you, unless it's a total blank. And on an uncoordinated board, he will not believe the fact that you will raise with a big hand because there's no reason to protect your hand on an uncoordinated board. So, more and more a case to fast plays your big hands. And I want everybody to remember that. Thank you for your email, David in England. This email comes from Brian Carpenter. He said, I stood in the poker room for a few hours recently watching a 1-2 no-limit table because I was looking to try my luck. Buy-in was set at a minimum of $50 and a maximum of $200. I was hesitant to sit down and play because even if I bought in for the maximum amount, I would only have a marginal stack because some players had obviously been there a while and had something like $350 or $400. I decided to sit and watch some more and not play. Was this a good move? Well, Brian, I can't tell you if it was a good move or not. It all depends on the game. But this is a kind of fundamental cash game error that people make that I hear talked about all the time in the casino at the lower levels. Well, there's a 2-5 no limit game, and the max buy-in's 500, but everyone's got, 4,000, so you're at a disadvantage when you sit down in that game. Well, no, you're not. If the max buy-in is 500, then it doesn't make any difference than all your opponents have over 5,000. You can only lose 500. Now, if they're opening up their pre-flop raises, to more than 10 times, if they're opening up to 60 or 70, well, it's going to be difficult for you to play until you increase your chip stack. You might, if you have a lot deep pockets, what we talked about last week, you might want to gamble up. In a 5, 10, 400 max restricted buying game, you might want to gamble it up to increase your stack size because you can't really call any types of suited connectors and small pocket pairs for implied odds because your stack size just doesn't warrant it. But the fact that you wouldn't sit in a juicy game, in a juicy 3-5 no limit game where the average stack is $5,000 because you can only buy in for 500 is ludicrous. You can only lose what's in front of you. It's a cash game. It's not a tournament. If a guy's got $5,000 in front of them, they have no advantage over you. The blinds do not escalate. It amazes me how often people make this mistake. It's all about game selection. It's about finding the juicy game. If you're in a capped game, I understand it's frustrating. You've got to increase your chip stack. But you should never be intimidated in a cash game by somebody else's stack size. The only thing that matters is your stack size. So remember that the next time you're looking at a game with deep stacks. Thank you for the email, Brian Carpenter. To follow up on this, I've got an email here from Lauren Finkelstein. He says, hey, Bart, which game would you rather play in and why? Both no limit hold'em. Game 1, 2-5, min buy-in 300, max buy-in 800, average stack about 1,000. Standard game. Occasional straddles. Standard opening bets of 30, get 3 or 4 callers. Opening bets of 60, get 1 or 2. Mostly straight up hold'em. Game number 2. 5-5 min buy. 5-5 blinds, min buy in 500, max 1,000. Average stack 5,000. Insane game. Straddles to 10, restraddles to 20, third ones to 40 are common. Opening bets of 100 get 5 callers. Several players, but not all, play 7 deuce for an extra 150 from each if they win with it. Thank you, Lauren. Well, right off the bat, I would tell you I would probably rather play in the livest game, which seems to be game 2, Lauren. The frustrating thing about that is if your max buy-in is 1,000, and the blinds are 5-5, but you're getting restraddled to 20, that's almost like playing a 10-20 game with a max $1,000 buy-in. It's not much. You really can't play poker. You almost have to wait for a big hand and do like a limp re-raise until you double through. But, if you have the bankroll to do it, that's usually going to bring in the most money per hour. Your 2-5 game with a 300 max or 300 min, 800 max, 1,000. That's not a bad game. But you really want to be looking for the livest game. And again, it doesn't make any difference how much money the other people on the table have. It's only what you have in front of you. So you could only lose what you have in front of you. So if I see people calling raises to 150, if I'm going to sit there in a game where the max buy-in is 1,000 and the game is crazy, and I have the opportunity to open with my $1,000 stack to 50 or 60, and I can get 2 or 3 guys that will call with 95% of their range pre-flop, and I'm talking about 8-4 off, then that game probably has the most value. Yes, mentally, the swings are going to be more. I guess, for me, I can deal with the fact that I know when I raise to 70 with $1,000 stack with aces, and a guy calls me with 9-3 offsuit for 70, if the board comes out 9-5-3, and we get it all in and he wins, I know that he has made, a losing play in the long run. And sometimes it's like, what is this guy doing? But, you've got to look over the long term, and that's why sometimes recreational players have a hard time with it, because if you're only playing, a couple times a month, and that type of thing happens where, a guy crushes your big hand, you've been waiting there, that's what you remember. But it's all about long-term expected value. So you're always looking for the livest game. Again, thank you for that email, Lauren. Last email of the day comes from David in Davis, California. He says, I just listened to the March 4th show in which you discussed the hand at a 10-20 table where you flopped a set of kings but lost to a straight. You noted the table was nitty. You raised to $100 pre-flop, which you said was your standard pre-flop raise. I'm not a very experienced player, and I'm hoping you could discuss how you determine how much to bet pre-flop. If a table is nitty, do you consider lowering your opening raise to 3 or 4 times the big blind? If a table is full of loose players, do you consider making even bigger raises with a hand like king? Thanks for your thoughts, and thank you very, very much for that email, David. It's a good question. It's tough to figure out when you're playing a deep stack. I've discussed that you can call pre-flop raises if you can make 10 times your stack, 10 times the raise if you hit a set. Well, what if you're playing, 100,000 deep? Are you calling, $10,000 raises with pocket deuces? You see my point. It comes up to a certain level where you can't use the math as a formula in terms of how much to raise pre-flop. But in tournaments, normally people will raise 3 to 4 times the big blind, or 2.5 times to 4 times the big blind. In a cash game, I really think that that's too small. In the 5-10 game at the bike, no limit cap game, I'm normally playing with at least $2,000, and my standard raise is to 65 to 70. But that's because I'm a good enough player where, normally someone will always have 10 times that stack size to call with small pocket pairs. But, it's not always the case that they'll have 20 times that raise size. The average stack might be 1,200, 12 to 1,500. And if I'm raising to 65 with aces and a guy calls me with a stack of 1,400 with 10-7 and diamonds, well, he's just not deep enough. That's more of like a 30 times raise size. So, I think 3 to 4 times the blind is too small in a cash game. I think you should be opening for 5, 4.5 if you're not getting any action. All the way up where if the table's really loose to maybe even, 10 times. If the table's really loose, yes, you should increase your raise size because you want to cut those implied odds out. And if you're playing in a 5-10 no limit game with 1,500 and you can raise it up to 100 with aces, well, you've cut all of the implied odds out except people who might have small pocket pairs. So the looser the table is, the more you want to make your raise. If the table's really tight and you have position, you might want to consider making your raise smaller to get action, but don't take it to too much of an extent. I don't really believe in sweetener raises. at the mid levels, I see even guys at Commerce at the 10-20 might raise to 50. As you move up, people will, they'll realize what you're doing, and you're going to get 3-bet popped. And people who play online, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. So I'm not really a big fan of that stop raise that some people make with a small pocket pair, where like a guy, wants to see a pre-flop, he wants to see a flop with pocket fives, and there's an aggressive guy in the button that keeps making it 100 in a 5-10 game, so instead of limping, he makes it a 40. If the guy's stupid enough to just call, then it might work, but normally those aggressive guys know what they're doing. I don't really use that quote-unquote stop raise all that much. Again, 4.5 to 7 times the big blind in a cash game, I think is the best way to go. And again, that's live. So thank you for that email, David. I hope that helps you out. And that is just about going to wrap it up for us this week. I am going to Foxwoods. I'm actually going home next week for Easter. I'm going home to Boston. I'm going to go up to my mother's family's house in Maine. I'm going to record one. So the next time you hear Cash Plays, it's going to be me in Maine, in Augusta, Maine. And then I'm off to Foxwoods for a week and a half to 2 weeks. So if you're there, say hi to me, and I'll be recording future episodes at Foxwoods. And then when I come back, again, my buddy Joe will be talking about the psychology of poker. And I actually got an email from a guy from Stocks Poker talking about the possibility of Leather Ass coming on the show. And that is, if you're unfamiliar with him, he is an online no-limit hold'em, I guess you can call it cash game grinder that has played almost more hands than, anyone, if not the most hands of anyone. Dusty Schmidt, I believe. Yeah, that's his name. Dusty Leatherass Schmidt. I'd love to have him come on the show, so hopefully we can work that out. So keep that in mind when you send those emails into cashplays@pokerroad.com. So I am Bart Hanson, and I will see you next week.